Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and in this one we are going to be talking about off-meta junglers and their biggest problems to why they struggle when you try and pick them up, especially in the current game state. The reason for this is, if you follow me on the gameplay channel, you will notice I did Morgana jungle, Diana, Rumble. We also have Zed and Darius as well. These things were directly buffed by Riot to be able to be used in the jungle, not to sort of provide an off-meta landscape, but simply to allow those people who play those champions to actually jungle. However, as you know, Diana and Morgana turned out very well. They're gonna actually end up being nerfed. I play things like Zyra and Ornn, but what if you want to play something that goes against the meta, that goes upstream instead of downstream? And what are the problems that will stop you climbing, stop you winning, and make life difficult for you? And essentially summarizing how you can actually execute an off-meta jungler successfully, even if it is difficult. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and of course subscribing. I've linked below for those of you who want access to my coaching via the Patreon or to sign up to that yourself. And now without hesitation, let's begin. So you're amongst the many players who absolutely detest the meta. You know, you don't play Udyr, you don't play Hecarim, or Graves, or Nidalee. The same things you've been seeing for months and months and months. Now obviously you might just pick a lesser known jungler, something like say Poppy. Poppy used to be considered off meta and now simply is a niche pick. So off meta I would define as something that has a below 1% pick rate, it really isn't common to see, and it's not their primary position. The thing is, I already made a Lost Junglers video talking about the Qiyana, Camille, Silas's and so on that were nerfed out of the role. Those are now kind of considered off meta because their pick rates are so low and their primary positions are definitely considered not jungle. So I'm not talking about your things like Sejuani, Skarner, Ivan, which all have like a 1.5% pick rate. I'm talking about the junglers that have a very low pick rate, that are not designed for the role and therefore have the issues we're about to discuss. Now first up, the things that become issues as soon as you lock in an off-meta jungler, whether it's Zyra, Ornn, Twitch, whatever you might choose, is clear speed and gank potential. And if you run into issues in these two phases already, you are basically primed for a sad game. Notably, all off-meta junglers will have a much slower clear speed than that of their meta counterparts. Things like Zyra, I can basically clear pretty decently. Same with Ornn, we can get 4-5 camps done by the time Crab is spawning. Around then, depending on whether we have a leash or not, Ornn can full clear very efficiently and healthily. But even then, that's significantly slower than the Hecarims, the Udyrs, the Lilias, and Karthuses of the world. This means if you then don't have good gank potential to take that timing into a lane, for example, because I can't full clear, I cut my clear short, go and try and gank, but wait a second, I'm Ornn, I'm Zyra. Yes, both of those have CC. Yes, one of those has good damage. Yes, we can actually gank, no doubt. But they are far from guaranteed ganks. And when you talk about things like Brand, what he does very well is he actually farms quickly. Zyra can farm quickly as well, but your gank potential isn't as high as something like a Lee Sin, a Elise, or what have you. And then on the other side of the coin, these off-meta junglers, whatever you're picking, don't have the same farming capabilities of the core jungle meta, which means inherently that you are at a disadvantage in both of those arenas, even if you might be stronger than the enemy you're against in one of them. The implication for this is not only that you have CC, it's also, do you have escapes? Do you have wall scaling? Are you able to move around the map with some kind of device that allows you to outplay enemies rather than, you know, just running at them? I mean, everyone thinks of Twitch, but the reason his win rate is so low is just because he gets obliterated by anything else. Yeah, sure, he can camo and cheese a lane, but he 100% will be out-farmed and most likely obliterated by a chem tank abuser. So now you're voicing, wait, hold up, what if you're against a Viego, a Rengar, things that can clear fast, but not really as fast as the meta either, maybe even a Vi, and then you throw in your Ornn, Zyra, and whatever pick you guys are playing, and saying, wait a second, don't they clear at the same speed? And I say, you know what, you're right. And that's the second point here. What is your jungle 1v1 matchup potential? And in the off-meta case, it is significantly weakened versus the majority cases. Now last year I released basically a full route guide, nothing's changed since then, whatever route you might need. In the case that you lose 1v1, what do we want to accomplish as say a Karthus? Right, you know what? I'm going to start at the same side as the enemy jungler, we're both going to sequence up, but because I cannot beat him 1v1 on the crab, I will simply go back to base and get the other crab, hopefully before he tries to double scuttle me, and then I can carry on my second sequence. That's been the meta for a long time. In the event your off-meta jungler of choice actually beats the enemy jungler 1v1, and they decide to do this, you do not have the farming cadence, you do not have the map scaling, and you do not have the prototypical skill set in your champion design necessary to actually punish him. The answer to a farming jungler is typically invasions, make sure you stop them farming, or you simply heavy gank, use that for river control, counter jungle, and snowball all your lanes and yourself into objectives. But usually an off-meta jungler will very much struggle to match that kind of tempo, And if the enemy jungler is, say, a very strong ganker, a fighter even that doesn't want to gank but it's really good 1v1, think Rengar, Viego, maybe some cheese box like a Shaco, what are you going to do if you guys both path the same side but you cannot full clear fast enough to reset to opposite crab like the Karthus? And even if you reverse clear down, to get on the opposite side of the enemy jungler, very rarely will you have the ganking prowess, the invade potential to totally capitalize on the situation in the way that you should in order to actually get ahead. Without 1v1 pressure, you simply cannot afford to go and run into the jungle and try and invade like a Rengar and a Viego. You cannot afford to fight 1v1 of a crab, even if you might have lane prio, because by the time they've rotated, even if they do rotate in your elo, you're dead. Which means very often you are giving up counter jungling opportunities, you are giving up crabs even though you shouldn't have to if you're playing something that was simply stronger in the role, and now you are inherently relying on your laners to help you out. And even if you do win a 2v2 for example, resource management always needs to be an advantage in your jungle, and that's connected to your clears. Can you do it fast enough, but can you also be healthy and have enough mana or energy or whatever necessary to actually go and, gank, fight, 1v1 crab and so on. In most cases, junglers will simply not be able to do this. This brings to mind something like a Talon. Yes, Talon has the 1v1 potential. Yes, Talon has the invade and the mobility and the map scaling, but Talon doesn't have that farming prowess, which means if your ganks and invades don't really pay off, the enemy jungler who's simply counter-ganking you, taking your stuff, and sequencing, farming, and ganking better than you will simply outscale and outlevel you. And this is why things like Zed and Darius haven't taken off, because their farming isn't fast enough and healthy enough, the ganks are not reliable enough, and they need to take high-risk maneuvers in order to get ahead. And it's why things like Morgana and Diana have done so well for different reasons. Morgana simply farms so quickly and has decent kit to be able to get a gank off. Even if it's not great, she's farming super fast, and she can end up countering a lot of junglers with her Q and with her E Black Shield. And that, of course, pool of disease basically just rinses every camp for the next 3 games. And when she gets that lead and can basically solo objectives, which is the next point, she can actually annihilate people with a full combo. We saw that on the gameplay channel. Diana, on the other hand, basically can farm very quickly, not as fast as Morgana, but she's very good in a 1v1 situation. She has annoying snowball potential, she can split push towers, when her ult is up she has a lot of burst in her kit, and when you combine that with the ability to invade counter jungle and farm relatively quickly, you've got a really great total package, and it's why both of them are getting nerfed from their clear speed specifically. It's also why those kind of buffs for junglers are really great, because it allows them, including off-meta junglers, to play around their strengths. Morgana is a great example of a Zyra archetype, whereas Diana is kind of like a better Echo at the moment in the jungle. Even though they can accomplish different things in terms of their champion kit, because they have options about clearing, farming, and so on to a good degree, they are viable junglers. Whereas if I don't get laners ahead or make some kind of impact as Ornn and Zyra, basically, yeah, I'm farming a lot of the time. Yes, I can actually farm very quickly, but I will not have the same level of impact. And the next thing is objective solo power and the need for laners. Imagine you're via Volibear and the enemy jungler does something. He farms a lot, maybe a full clear, shows up on the opposite side of the map, he does it again, or he stays out too long to counter jungle you. At level 4-5 as Volibear 5, we can solo the dragon very easily. So we will do it, we can sneak it. We can get in there, we have vision control, and if someone shows up, we can fight them. Zyra and Ornn, your off-meta jungler of choice? I don't think we can do that very well, which means when openings are given for objectives, and this is huge, you simply cannot afford to take them unless your laners can help. But you might have the issue of actually being able to get your laners ahead because you don't have the same sort of ganking capabilities unless they have good setup. For the record, I'm not diminishing Zyra and Ornn's ganking capability, it's definitely good. But because it's not as good as other junglers, simply either from a damage perspective or a mobility perspective, and because you're missing out on all these windows that I've been mentioning, you are simply being put behind further and further as the game goes on. By the time you reach the mid game, if you were playing something that was more normally suited to the role, you actually might be winning the game. But because you're playing an off-meta jungler, things are much harder and you're going to find yourself playing from behind quite a lot. This is where I have to give a shout out to certain off-meta junglers that just seem to have great matchups and ways of navigating into the meta. Sion jungle. I know you're in the comments there on every single video. He actually only has a 0.2% pick rate, but a 51% win rate. Why? Because he matches up well to certain junglers, but he also has great level 6 lane ganks, he has a slow, he has a knockup, he has a shield, he gets to scale with HP also, and later on simply becomes a hugely meaty tank. He also has significant more 1v1 potential than many other off-meta junglers. And again, a lot of the issues are not necessarily with ganking or scaling, it's with your ability to farm well and do those things and solo objectives. So for this point, I want to talk about the hardest goal of off-meta jungling, and something you really need to be aware of. And that is getting to the point in the game where you being the jungler is totally irrelevant other than you having smite. By that I mean you've navigated the early and mid-game transition with grace. You're not too far behind, you got something, you know, they take a dragon, you're able to get your top to do a herald, this is good. You allowed your champ to scale, you allowed your champ to get core itemization, and you didn't fall too far behind in the process, and maybe even you got a few ganks off. If you are playing an early game off-meta jungler, then of course you have to ensure your ganking and unique pathing, using Talon, Poppy as examples, is more of a priority than scaling to this point, but the principle is the same. You really have to accentuate and play to the strengths of your champion. Now, whether your off-meta jungler of choice is a teamfighter, a farming scaler, a mid-game spiker, a split pusher supreme, when you reach the point that you can do these things as if you were in the champion's main position, you have survived the jungling phase and the normal thing of rotations and trying to close a game out that some people call macro even though it isn't, and I kind of feel like I'm getting brain damage when I scout it a lot, takes over. But everything before that point makes achieving it that much harder unless you are a savant on the champion and understand everything about them, including matchups, including adaptive itemization, including how to play on a budget, and knowing how to farm and scale and gank as a jungler when you are losing that matchup basically every single game. This is legitimately the only way you can actually execute on these game plans. If you're a good early game jungler, you have to use good gank pathing. You have to, if you lose the 1v1 matchup to the enemy jungler, avoid them with good reverse clear pathing. Understand which lane is other win condition and make sure you get them ahead so that you can get those objectives and at least get some counter jungling and farming done so that you yourself are still relevant. Things like a set Kiana Talon, maybe even a Poppy if you want, a Shen for example. But if you have things like a Sion, a Cho'Gath, an Ornn, a Zyra, all of these champions can scale supremely well, which means while that opportunistic lane presence is very much encouraged, it's very important you understand quadrant clearing, clear sequencing, advanced jungle pathing, again we did a video on this, to maximize your champion's gains while not allowing the enemy jungler to reach theirs, and also not allowing the game state to be so far behind you that nothing you do matters anymore. And that's always the biggest problem. It's the hardest thing to do because you always end up giving up so many things away, as I said. However, as a final point, the mental game with your teammates is no joke. Free tilt in the champion lobby by clicking Zyra jungle, guaranteed. Easy tilt as soon as one thing goes wrong, guaranteed. Now you've got to calm them down, babysit them like kindergarteners, and now you're explaining to them, hold up, I have 70 CS on the enemy jungler, high kill participation, and I got a dragon and a herald. Yeah, they got 2 dragons, yes you got ganked 1 time, but I definitely out-jungled him. They don't care. They just see your off-meta jungle pick, they flame you, and they blame you to the point that they stop trying. And this is the biggest problem when you pick something off meta. And yes, it's very tilting because you could win a lot of games if you simply played a normal jungler and they didn't tilt. Even if you're doing the same thing with your favorite champion, it doesn't matter to your teammates. So keep that in mind. Understand you need to mute everyone, and understand you need to go above and beyond to actually earn their trust in the game. And when you do, you will get honors, you will win, but it will be the hardest battle of your life. Well, there you have it, just a few thoughts, a little bit of a rant on what you need to do as an off-meta jungler in order to succeed, as well as the challenges you might face. And yes, I kind of undersold a lot of junglers there. Yes, they can be solid in the role, but inherently they are not, and that's why they're off-meta, because if they were good at jungle, they would be meta. But let me know in the comments, what off-meta jungler is your favorite? Are you seeing any success in ranked with it? Maybe it's something you just whip out in Clash. I always love to play off-meta. Let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something just about how to navigate your particular matchups. I will leave a link to all the videos I referenced in the description. Please do leave a like, share, and comment if you think the content is worthy. Don't forget to consider subscribing to this channel and the other channel. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I will see you all in the next video.